Today we have available to us hundreds of varieties of cheeses. Now we do that because we like different cheese flavors. But in the 18th century, cheese was a little different. 250 years ago, cheese was about food preservation. How can we bring milk way into the future? How can we have it be good a year later, even longer than that? How can we make milk so that we can take it on board ship or carry it over land? Although we make it for food preservation, it turns out that we really enjoy its texture and its taste. And why do we have all these incredible different varieties of cheeses? Well, the idea of what's happening with dairy and what's happening with cheese 250 years ago gives us a hint about where all these varieties of cheese come from. If we go looking at the historical cookbooks and books about, say, cheese and dairy in the 18th century, we find references to different kinds of cheese, say different recipes, but not really that many. The variety of cheeses are really built out of the environment about where the cheeses were made. So these different varieties have to do with the region. And sometimes the regional variations of cheese have to do about the way people make cheese, basically the recipe and the technique, and a lot of it has to do with the milk that's available. So each region has a different kind of soil, a different kind of plant life, and a different variety of cow or goat or, let's say, sheep that the milk is coming from. Each one of those locations is going to make a different kind of cheese, even if they used exactly the same kind of recipe. If we read in the historical texts, we really get this whole concept of what the environment does to each and every sort of cheese that's being made. It's fascinating that the authors really kind of go into depth about the fact that Cheshire cheese is Cheshire cheese because of the special grass that they grow and the variety of cow that they're using. As we look at all the different European cultures in the 18th century, all the ones that really sent people to the New World, they all have their special cheese cultures. It turns out that the most important product for the dairy farmer in the 18th century is cheese. Now, he has all kinds of products, right? Milk is always in demand. Everybody wants butter. Everybody wants cream. We even want buttermilk. But cheese is the product that they can make at any time that they have an excess amount of milk. And that happens whenever you have a prolific time. It's the perfect time of year and you've got milk running out your ears because, of course, you always want to have enough milk for the low time. So inevitably, at certain times of the years, you have excess milk. So cheese is where you're going to go for that. And cheese is always popular because it can be kept for great periods of time. So cheese is even used on board ship as a way to give food to the sailors. It's also used for travel, and it's a product that you can send to market miles and miles away, which is not easy to do with regular liquid milk. That really has to sell into your local market. You can't send that 100 miles away. The cheese we'll be making today is scaled down to a small household size. We'll be making one just about a 3-pound wheel of cheese.
Today we're going to make some cheese, and it's an interesting process. Your first wheel is not going to be your best wheel. There's a learning curve to this thing, and I am still learning, but it's okay because we're going to do this together and we're going to make some cheese, and it's going to be really tasty and wonderful. The first thing that we need to worry about for our cheese is milk. Milk is the most important ingredient here, and the better milk that you get for this process, the better your cheese will turn out in the end. So what we're looking for is something that is not pasteurized, or at least it is very little pasteurization in the process. If you can find non-homogenized milk, that's going to be even better. That's going to make a better wheel of cheese in the end. What I've got here in the pot is 3 gallons of milk. If you're doing this at home, I wouldn't go any less than 2 gallons of milk, and you can go as high as you want to. It's usually a pound of cheese, 2 gallons of milk equivalent, so I've got 3 gallons of milk. I should roughly have just a little bit shy of 3 pounds of cheese. And what we want to do with this milk is get it over the fire. If you're at home, obviously get it on the stove. You're going to want your burner to be around medium because we're going to heat this up slowly. So I'm going to get this hanging over the fire. And what we want to do is we want to slowly bring this up to about 90 degrees. And if you have a kitchen thermometer, that's great. You're gonna be doing better than I am, because what I have is my body temperature, and that's how we're gonna test it. Once this is 90 degrees, and you're gonna be able to judge that at home with your kitchen thermometer, or if you're cooking in a setting like I am, you're just gonna stick your finger in it. And when it's about the same temperature as your body, that's when you're gonna pull it off. When you do that, you're gonna let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then you're gonna add your live culture. In the time period, this isn't something that they would really have to worry about, because they were living in a world with bacteria. They're not living in a very sterilized world like we're living in now. But we have to add, because our milk is pasteurized, we need to add something to it. We need to add something with live culture. For this purpose, I'm using plain yogurt. And they could have used something like that in the time period as well. You're gonna take your yogurt and you're gonna add, about a cup with this amount of milk. And you're gonna just get a little bit of milk, and you're gonna stir it up so that it's gonna mix in easily. We don't wanna just plop a kind of almost solid yogurt in here. We want it to be able to mix throughout, and we're gonna put that in there, stir it up for about a minute, and we're gonna stir that, trying to get bottom to top as we stir, so that we have this constant motion that's bringing all of that and blending it together. We're gonna let that sit for about 10 minutes. While that's sitting, while your milk is sitting there and the live cultures are kind of swimming in there and getting incorporated, we're gonna get a rennet put together. Now, depending on the kind of rennet that you have, it's either gonna be liquid or in a tablet or a pellet of some sort, most likely. You just follow the instructions for the rennet on the packaging. Different amounts of milk are gonna require different amounts of rennet. But once we add that, we're then gonna stir that again. And once we stir that for a minute, we're gonna let that sit. And some packages say 45 minutes, and some people have success with letting that sit for 45 minutes. I let mine set for 45 minutes, and that wasn't enough. I went at about an hour and said, this is enough. But really, the next batch I tried, I let it go to an hour and a half, and then the next batch, I let it go to 2 hours. It seems like an hour and a half for my rennet was about the right amount of time for it to sit and incorporate. And you're gonna set that somewhere where you can keep it warm. So at home, you might be able to put a lid on your pot. You might be able to do like a water bath that you put this whole pot inside of in the sink, or put a blanket or a towel over it. But you wanna try to maintain that heat as best as you can. Our curd is set, and there are a couple of indicators that you're looking for. Now let's talk about curd just a little bit, because it's easy to read and think, if it's not exactly like what you're reading, this like nice firm curd, that it's not correct. And that's just not the case, because I have made cheese with what I would consider something that seems like pretty loose curd. It just doesn't always set up the way that we'd expect it to, or that we'd like it to, depending on the ingredients that we have at hand. Not everybody has the perfect milk to make cheese, and not everybody's going to get this huge piece of curd. At the end, we're trying to break some of that down and get some of the moisture to come out of it anyway, so we're going to be okay. Even if it doesn't feel or seem like something that you might see when you look up how to make cheese, I think that you'll be all right. We're gonna go ahead and cut this, and the indicator to know that it's ready is that you're looking for a clean break. And so you're gonna insert your knife kind of like a 45-degree angle, or you could just even use a finger, and you're gonna pull up, and that curd is just it's gonna split apart. And that's when you know, okay, we're ready to move on to the next step. We saw the clean break, and now we're gonna get in there and cut it. Now, don't make this difficult. Don't make it harder than it has to be. This is simple. All you need is a long knife, and I absolutely love this knife that John made for this very purpose. And we're gonna go in here, and we're gonna go straight up and down. We're gonna cut about every ½ inch to an inch, back and forth, all the way across. And then we're gonna do that side to side, same width. And then, when that's all done, we're gonna go in kind of at a 45, and we're just gonna cut that horizontally. And the whole point here is that we're trying to break this curd up into little bits, and then we're just gonna let it sit for around 10 or 15 minutes. Really, the whole point of all this process is we're doing everything that we can to get moisture, to get liquid to come out of the curd so that we can make a good cheese. Now we're gonna stir the curd and just kind of help that along. What we want is that basically we cut those into inch little blocks, right? But we want the edges to soften around those blocks. We don't want hard edges. And when we're done stirring, this is kind of gonna break up to where most pieces are gonna be kind of like a size of a peanut. Automatically, just from the motion that's going on here, you're gonna start seeing a change in the curd, those hard edges are gonna break off, and we're gonna start getting smaller pieces as it releases more and more moisture. The next part of this process, we're actually going to start forming our cheese wheel. And this process here has a few different steps, but basically we have our pot where our curd is, and it has fallen to the bottom and it is separated from the whey. And so we need something slotted to scoop that out. And you can use a slotted spoon at home or whatever you want to, but we're gonna scoop that whey out. When we do, we're going to scoop it into a piece of cheesecloth that's set over anything that can strain. So a colander or a sieve will work, and you'll want some kind of bowl underneath to catch liquid. We're gonna put the curds in there, and we're gonna give them just a little bit of a squeeze to kind of get some of that very loose liquid out of there. And then at that point, we're going to shift over to, we have a ring with cheesecloth inside of it, and that is what our wheel of cheese is going to be. And we're going to start putting our cheese in there, kind of little baseball-sized clumps at a time, until we get that filled up with one layer across the bottom. And then we're going to salt, and we're gonna do it again. And we're gonna keep that process going until we fill this cheese ring up. We've got our curds and our whey separated, squeezed, and now we're kind of forming our wheel inside of our ring here. Now, I did salt this, and salting is a big part of this because it's part of the drying process. Be judicious. Go more salt than you think that you should. I think the first time that you do this, you think, oh, that's way too much salt, and it's not. So salt more than you think that you should, and kind of really mix it in there with everything. Now we're ready to press this sucker, and this is my favorite part about it because all these wonderful juices just come out the bottom, and you can really see the cheese starting to happen in this stage. We're gonna fold all of our cloth in, and you know, some people are gonna be more concerned than others about what the end result of their cheese wheel looks like. I'm a pretty utilitarian person, so if there are some fold marks, it's not gonna bother me. But if that is you, you can trim your cloth and you can make sure that it looks really pretty, and that's fine. I'm not making fun of that, that's wonderful. To start off, for the first 12 hours, we're just gonna get our follower in here, and then we're going to put that 30 pounds of pressure on. And you can already see when I just put a little bit of pressure on, moisture's coming out. And that's what we're working on here. We're trying to get as much moisture out of this wheel of cheese as we possibly can. So in about 12 hours, I'm gonna flip this. Then I'm gonna put as much as 75 pounds of pressure because we still wanna see little bits of drip coming out of the bottom of it. And that's how you're gonna be able to tell if you've got enough weight.
It was fascinating that as I was reading the books about dairying in the 18th century and about making cheese, one of the references was about the amount of cheese that you would get from a cow in a year. And that amount that they were mentioning in this particular book that I was reading was 300 pounds. Now, generally, you're going to get something like a pound of cheese out of a gallon of milk. That means that a cow in the 18th century is producing between, say, 200 and 500 gallons of milk. Today, our modern cow herds are producing almost 10 times that amount of milk. It's amazing how much progress has been made in dairy farming from 250 years ago to today. I thought it was very interesting that as I was studying the books where they're writing about the dairy farmer, about making cheese, that they spend a good deal of time talking about the number of farmers that make bad cheese, or in this case, let's say the dairy maids, because they're the ones who are doing the most of the cheese making. And dairy is difficult because there are a lot of natural bacteria that are floating around in the air and in the milk. And so if you're not very, very strict about your cleanliness, if you're not very, very careful about that, you will get strange strains of bacteria and different kinds of fermentation happening in your cheese. So there were some people that were very, very good at it. They had their cleanliness down and their system down, and their cheese was always good. And then other people that just couldn't make the cheese properly. And yet, these authors knew some of these concepts, but they could never fully describe it in the 18th century and realize that it was the cleanliness issue and the systematic approach that made good cheese every time or bad cheese every time. We do find some recipes for different cheeses in regular cookbooks in the 18th century, but the vast majority of cheese, at least in Great Britain, is being made in these larger dairy operations. Now, these operations might be of varying size, 10 cows, 20 cows, 40 cows, up to 200 cows in a dairy herd was at least mentioned in one of these books. So we have very differing sizes of operations, and the cheeses are very different. So in a household, we might just make a 3 or 4 pound cheese, but it's also mentioned that in Cheshire, they're making 80-pound wheels, 100-pound wheels, up to a 140-pound wheel of cheese, and that's in the 18th century.
This is our cheese, and it's looking really, really wonderful. Now, if you go looking for this on YouTube or different places, you're gonna see 100 different cheesemakers with all of their different processes of weighing this. The point is that you wanna draw as much moisture out of the cheese while treating it as delicately as possible. This is after 24 hours. This is our cheese. It's still a little soft to the touch, but as it's out, it's going to get a hardened skin across the whole outside of it. So now we just need to make sure that we're flipping it twice a day. And then after, a couple of weeks, we're gonna go to once a day. And then after those couple of weeks, we're gonna go to every few days. But we're gonna keep flipping it and keep getting air all around it. It will get some mold on it as it ages. And all you're gonna do there is get some apple cider vinegar and you're gonna clean up those mold spots. Every time that you flip it, just salt it a little bit until it gets a nice hard crust. This kind of a cheese you can eat right away if you use pasteurized milk, but it's not really what you want. What you want after you put the time into this is you want a nice aged cheese. You're gonna wanna wait at least 2 months. That's the minimum. And then, 6 months is probably a really wonderful window, but you can age the sucker for years if you want to, and it's just gonna taste better. Cheese is finished. Now, I told you guys to wait a couple months before you try the cheese. I made this cheese a week and a half ago, and I'm gonna try it right now. Now, I'm not suggesting to do that, but I can't wait to do it. We're gonna try it. So, here's a little slice. It smells cheesy. And almost tastes like cheese. It's not there yet. It needs to age. It really does. But it's good. It's got a good texture. You can taste, what's going to happen to it. And I'm glad that I suggested add more salt because I don't think I added enough salt to this one. And so make sure to put plenty of salt in there. But it is good. It's just not very rich yet. And it's gonna get more of that as it ages, but it is a delicious cheese and you will love it if you make it.